All right, it's 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from around the world. My name is Emma Tozer, and I'm the operations lead at We Are One Humanity. On behalf of our team, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's conversation, Brazil on the Global Stage, Climate Cooperation in the Global South. We're coming together for this webinar at a really pivotal moment when earlier this month, Brazil hosted the BRICS Summit in Rio de Janeiro, BRICS being the economic and political bloc of major emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And later this year, Brazil is again going to welcome the world for COP30, the 30th United Nations Climate Change Conference, which brings together nearly every nation to negotiate on collective action on the climate crisis. So these events place Brazil at the heart of urgent global conversations on climate justice and on the future of international cooperation in a rapidly shifting world order. At We Are One Humanity, we believe in creating spaces like this one, where dialogue transcends ideology, where diverse voices are heard, and where we can collectively imagine a more just, sustainable, and inclusive future. Founded by Rajmohan Gandhi in 2024, We Are One Humanity is a human rights-centered publication and platform that brings together changemakers to analyze and discuss the most pressing social issues of our time. And through our digital magazine and events like today's, we explore topics from democracy to global migrations to societal divisions, fostering informed participation from individuals around the world. So today's webinar reflects that mission. We're going to explore Brazil's expanding global role at the intersection of grassroots activism, multilateral diplomacy, and digital governance. The format is simple. Our moderator is going to guide the conversation with our panelists, and we're going to leave some time for audience questions at the end. So please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box at any time. And with that, we're honored to have with us a distinguished group of speakers. Our moderator, Fabro Steibel, is the Executive Director at the Institute of Technology and Society of Rio de Janeiro. He holds a PhD and is affiliated with the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University. He is also a fellow in open government with the Organization of American Atestado. Previously, he served as a member of the National Data Protection Agency Council of Brazil and is a frequent public speaker on technology. Maíra Iragare is the founder of Insamauma, an initiative that bridges science and spirituality to foster ecological awareness and indigenous collaboration in the Amazon. With indigenous ancestry and a PhD in geography, her work spans over 16 years at the intersection of activism, human rights, environmental protection, and cultural preservation. Dedicated to honoring ancestral wisdom and supporting indigenous communities, she co-creates pathways for planetary healing through immersive cross-cultural experiences in the rainforest. And Laura Trajber Waisbich is Deputy Director of Programs at the Igarapé Institute, a specialist in South-South cooperation. She has 15 years of experience in research and policy in the areas of development, foreign policy, and human rights, with a focus on the role of emerging countries of the South in global governance and international development. Laura is a political scientist and international relations expert by training with a PhD in geography from the University of Cambridge. She's worked as a researcher and lecturer at the University of Oxford, where she directed the institution's Brazilian Studies program. She's also worked with international organizations, think tanks, and nonprofit organizations in Brazil, the US, and Europe. We're grateful to all three of them for lending their time and expertise to this conversation. And now it's my pleasure to hand over the microphone to our moderator, Fabro Steibel, to get us started. Fabro, over to you.
Emma, thank you very much and welcome everyone here, everybody listening. My name is Fabro Steibel. I run an independent research center called ITS, Institute for Technology and Society, and we are not from climate. We say that we like to help climate to be something, but we don't come from climate, we help others. At COP30, what we're doing is that we are organizing what we call Mutirão Tecnoclima. Mutirão, which is a word from the COP presidency, that is a word in Brazil. It doesn't have a clear meaning, a specific meaning, and that is important. It means lots of people together to achieve something. That's my definition. And Tecnoclima, because in Belém you have Tecnobrega, which was a movement from digital music that just revolutionized how we create value for artists and actors in the internet long time ago. There is a website that you can enter, and you see there around 100 initiatives from Brazil that kind of work with technology and climate to produce something. We are part of a constellation of activities, so we are not the website, we are our website that helps to get these initiatives. I fully recommend you to check on Vision COP. They are doing another part of this mutirão, which would be very grassroots and so on. And if you talk to Maíra, you see she was doing another part of the mutirão and so on, so on. I think that it's always interesting to see how Brazil positions itself in the global order. We are not China, we're not US, we are brokers, we are good guys, we are bad guys. We are always the broker and kind of breaking deals and negotiations and other things. We kind of push forward the BRICS, which I think it's a very interesting new order to make dialogues with G20 and others. We did last year the G20. For me, was very interesting how Brazil really pushed forward the agenda, while in India, the letters of presidency and declarations were done kind of at the last minute. Brazil arrived in the first minute, the first meeting with lots of text and so on. G20s are very conservative, they move very slowly, but I think Brazil kind of have a good take on that. I can say that from some of the working groups I followed. And the last BRICS meeting that we just had now in Rio de Janeiro, they come up with a letter that is quite something in a polarized world. It certainly goes against the US in terms of AI and other things, but it also makes a South by South cooperation something to be discussed. So I think today we have two very, very, very good voices to hear from. Laura, I know her because I follow her steps. Long time ago, she was the independent rapporteur mechanism, the IRM for the Open Government Partnership. She did the first action plans review. I followed her steps. And I think we have this vision of more than 10 years of open government, of civic participation, mobilization, which is something that has shifted in understanding and framings along the years. Maybe open government was a way more positive wording than it is today. Maybe open government today can be weaponized against civil society or against others, but it's still a crucial value to pursue as a government and something in a democratic state like Brazil to push forward. And then we also have Maíra's point of view. I think she is the person that we should be hearing at COP30 and listen to what is needed. When we bring COP to Belém, we are bringing to somewhere. We are bringing to a community. We are bringing to ecosystem that is very vivid. And she experienced this from the inside, but also she experienced the power from the outside we try to exercise in Belém. I define myself as an outside of Belém for sure. And I think it's very interesting to see her takes on that. So maybe for a quick introduction, Laura, would like to say a welcoming words to who's viewing us?
Of course. Well, it's really a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be among different pieces of what Fabro was saying, the mutirão, right? We are all connected in the same goal of advancing the climate agenda for people, nature, and climate. We have different positionalities, as we like to say in social sciences. We are based in different types of institutions. We have different partners. We are probably working on different parts of this very complex system. The organization I work for, the Igarapé Institute, is a think and do tank. We like to call ourselves like this because it's more than a think tank, that it's only producing papers and publications and reports. We also want to do things with public policy. We want to implement together with governments solutions for our common problems. And this is the way we are coming to this very special year, as Fabro was saying, the year of 2025 is the year of Brazilian dual presidency of BRICS and COP. It follows the year of 2024, that was the year that Brazil was hosting G20. So Brazil is definitely back, as President Lula likes to say, once he got elected, that he would put Brazil back into the world. It's a bit what we're seeing. I think for a kind of introduction, I might just stop here and then we continue afterwards of the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Mayra, please say welcoming words. Your phone, your mic.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So hello everyone. I am so honored to always be in spaces where we are talking about solutions and we are talking about ways to move forward as humanity. So I'm very honored to be here and very happy to be here with all of you today, and just wishing that this is not just a simple conversation that we have today, but that this discussion might add something into your souls and something into your life and give you maybe a key towards your next steps as a human being on this earth at this very moment, remembering what Chief Seattle always says, that the earth does not belong to us, we belong to earth. And so it's really special every time that we gather to open up our hearts and minds towards becoming better people for this planet.
Thank you very much. I'll make now one question to both our speakers, and then I enter some specific ones. So the first one is about from the Amazon to the world grassroots, so climate leadership. What can multilateral spaces like COP and BRICS learn from grassroots organizing Brazil? What we're doing right, what we should do next? I will pick an example that I love from New Zealand, from the Maori indigenous community. They are doing AI. They create data spaces, they create organizations, they have their own norms on how to share data, and now they are influencing how New Zealand treats data. It's really important, and I think it's way better than our data protection framework, to be quite honest, because they have this idea that data is the new land, which means that the same way they see the land as something that is communal and something that belonged to them and was taken away, they see data in the same light. So if I could use that as a grassroots movement to influence COP and BRICS, I would just say, take a look on how you're sharing data and how you're fostering AI. I think there is other principles and norms that can be said. Mayra, we start with you. What do you think the grassroots movement has to innovate and to bring lessons to the multilateral bodies?
So my entire PhD research was about indigenous movement in Brazil. And I was very surprised when I started researching social movement theory and realized indigenous movement does not really fit into any theory that has been written. And I'm really excited working with Brazilian indigenous people because Brazil's grassroots climate action is really a living lab. Like grassroots leaders really show us how to align survival with biodiversity protection, how to mobilize with super limited resources, how to lead without waiting for permission. I've worked for more than 10 years alongside with the Munduruku people. It's extremely impressive. I've heard so many organizations saying, we support the Tapajós, we support the Munduruku, but the funds would never actually get to the Munduruku or hardly get to the Munduruku. And somehow they would always figure it out. They would always stand up and come up with really interesting ways of acting and protecting their territories. And they've been super successful, because the dam that was planned, the Tapajós Dam, wasn't built there yet and hopefully will not. So I think that we have a lot to learn, and what the multilateral spaces can learn is how to decentralize action and really have community ownership, the cultural intelligence in climate work, and spiritual ecology and land-based wisdom. Now, you were talking about sharing data and AI, and I've seen it firsthand, when you put technology in the hands of indigenous communities, it goes a long way with it. But we can't forget that there is over 5,000 local communities today in Brazil that don't even have access to internet or electricity at all. So we have a gap that we need to fulfill. And when communities have access, one of the projects that I led with the Munduruku at the Environmental Investigation Agency was to put internet in the community-based, the biggest communities that they had along the Tapajós, because there's more than 130 indigenous communities for the Munduruku on the Tapajós River, so it's a lot. But we had put internet in the 9 bases that they had. And then we gave them smartphones with an app that EPON helped creating with indigenous communities so they could really do their monitoring of their land through this app. So it's easier to map as opposed to using satellite. And with the internet and with those apps and with the training how to use the drones, their work just went to a whole different level. So there's so much we can learn, but also we need to invest, right? They need to have access to these technologies, to the trainings, and they can do the work themselves. So I really see our grassroots movement as global leaders. And what we lack today most often is funding. And although they lack funding, they offer what they lack in funding, they offer in vision. And so I hope that COP can learn to listen before it decides, and that we really need to be less expectable and more soil under our nails kind of work.
Mayra, thank you. And before the meeting started, Mayra made the idea brainstorm. What if we invest the same amount we put in COP in indigenous communities? What kind of innovations and changes we'll have? Laura, I think people usually forget that our constitution is open because of indigenous populations. In 1987, the idea was to do in Brazil 3-week discussions and then a new constitution. And then indigenous populations just invaded the streets, invaded the Congress, between quotes, and kind of said, no, we need it to be open. And this is why we have more indigenous rights in the constitutions, because they invaded the grassroots movements and they shape it. Then Black movement comes, women movement comes, other civil society comes, and then becomes the constitution that we like. And this is kind of the grassroots innovation that we have. How do you see this grassroots movements kind of inspiring multilateral bodies today?
An interesting question. Let me start with the nexus between grassroots activism and the Brazilian government, and potentially the Brazilian government also then leading on global processes and shaping or trying to reshape multilateral bodies. Because I think a lot of the things that we see right now and we consider as innovations coming from Brazilian foreign policy actually were co-constructed alongside different civil society organizations, many of them social movements, as you were mentioning, indigenous movements, women's movements, and other social movements related to land and land rights and fight against hunger. Many of the things that after the constitution, as Fabro Brazilian constitutions in 1988 became the so-called citizen constitution, and the many public policies that were implemented since were co-constructed. They were pushed, from the outside with expertise and with the will and the knowledge and the activism of many groups that actually wanted those promises to be fulfilled. They wanted public policies that would then implement what the constitution was promising. And we see the same kind of translation, if I can put it like this, into foreign policy. The ways in which foreign policy started also to work to promote certain policies, a certain vision of, an inclusive democracy, inclusive development. And that's, obviously there is no, I would say there is no consensus within our foreign policy community of whether or not focusing our attention, our limited resources in promoting the social agenda is the right thing to do. Many people in this space would like Brazil to be a more trade or economic focused player in the international arena. But to go back to the climate discussion, we see right now in today's government a commitment, at least, I mean, both, I would say, both in the rhetorical stance, but also in the implementation, the public policy, you see a greater commitment to the climate agenda. We see a complete kind of set of, we can call it innovation, right? Public policy innovation. There are many things that are happening inside Brazil. They're also filtering and being translated into foreign policy. And that's the way in which Brazil is promoting COP right now, is to get some of these ideas that were co-constructed over the years with civil society. So let me just give you one or two examples. The very nexus between climate and nature, the importance of forest. This was not in the climate agenda until very recently. It became an important thing for Brazil in the way Brazil sees itself as a forest country, and it's promoting the forest agenda. And this is happening both at home and abroad. We can and we should criticize whether or not Brazil is being ambitious enough, whether or not these policies are working, what are the shortcomings. But it's true that we've seen, in the past decade or so, that really a lot of innovation coming in this country, and also the ways in which this innovation is being translated abroad. Just to give a very concrete example, right now Brazil is trying to negotiate, it's proposing to the world the so-called TFFF, the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, which will be a fund that it's being negotiated, a fund for conservation of tropical forests around the world, not only in Brazil and abroad. And to connect with the indigenous conversation here, one of the guidance or regulations or conditions for countries to access funding in this facility, whenever it comes to life, it's that a significant part of the funding has to go to indigenous groups and local groups. And this has been a long-standing demand. Why? Because existing climate funds or nature funds don't have that requirement. And as Maida was saying, these multilateral funds do not reach the very local, right? They got somewhere in between in the intermediaries. And so I think the ways in which Brazil is proposing this to the world, it's already benefiting from the conversation and the advocacy of groups that have shown throughout the years that these global facilities were not reaching people on the ground the way they should. So, I mean, I can go on, but maybe you can go to the next question. But just to make sure that what we see Brazil doing right now, and maybe I will just end with, Fabro was mentioning the word mutirão. This very idea of mutirão, working together, comes from Brazilian participatory democracy. It comes from participatory mobilizing. And the ways in which foreign policy and diplomats are using right now to convene a global call for people to work alongside the Brazilian presidency of COP, to make COP work this year, it's already using, right? It's borrowing this language that comes from our own co-creation, our own history of mobilizing alongside civil society. But I'm going to end here, and then we go to the next round.
Laura, I'll address the next question to you. It just, what you say reminds me of Echo 92. I was young when there was Echo 92, and this is kind of like a pivotal shifting moment where the policy framing shifted definitely from climate, it's a national issue, to climate being a transnational, a global issue. And it happened in Brazil, it happened in Rio, and I think it was the first mutirão that I remember. The country was absolutely hyped with everything. All the schools were discussing and so on. And I wonder what's the parallel between 1992 and 2005, because we are seeing a global shifting order. We are seeing the idea that blocs should come again. Are you with me or are you against me? That multilateral should be less influential than bilaterals. So one country agreements with the other should come less and lots of countries coming together. Laura, how do you see Brazil just hosted the BRICS summit and we will lead conversation COP30 in Belém this year. How do you see Brazil positioning itself in this new multipolar world, especially at the intersection of climate diplomacy, development cooperation, and South by South solidarity?
Okay, well, many of us would like COP to be as COP30 to be as emblematic as Rio 92. Although I think, to be very honest, I think we live in a different world. Just to following on what you just said, Fabro, 1992 was still that kind of optimism after the Cold War. We were living that kind of liberal spirit that we always knew it was just, it was never as liberal as it was framed. The liberal order had many problems, many injustices, but still the kind of narrative of the liberal order after the Cold War was very much there. International relations were in there was a short moment of the hyper optimism about, global agendas. And that's exactly the decade of the 90s were really the decades of the most prolific UN global, normative production, with all the conferences that took place, the social conferences that took place in the 90s, and the major environmental conference of the 90s. We don't see that. We live in a hyper fragmented, fractured world, polarized in many ways, as you were saying. And Brazil is navigating, to go back to Brazil, right? Brazil is navigating this landscape in an interesting position, because Brazil is both a democratic country and a developing country, a country from the South. And in a way, it has always been the foreign policy identity of Brazil to be this bridge. Brazil and Latin America, to be honest, to be fair, Latin America is the most Western part of the global South. It has been the case, it speaks to our history. This kind of positionality in global affairs has made over the years Latin American countries, in Brazil in particular, very very conscious of the kind of bridging role, and very, very productive and protective of the multilateral arena. Why? Because multilateralism actually matters for small countries, for less powerful countries. And so when we discuss right now the ways in which certain countries are tracking from multilateral arenas, or trying to reform or even dismantle existing institutions, you see a lot of countries in the global South, including Brazil and others, that are just trying to safeguard existing institutions. So they're not safeguarding because they like every single thing that is happening. They have been the most critical voices within the system, but they always wanted to reform it from within, rather than dismantling or live without any kind of, multilateral arrangement. And I think that's exactly the spirit that I see in the Brazilian foreign policy right now. It's to say, we do occupy this bridging hybrid space between many worlds. We do trust in international cooperation, and we believe we are better off with international cooperation than we would be without. We want a better seat in the high table, that's for sure. Brazil is always seeking for, aspiring for a better seat. But we want to be constructive. And that's an interesting position. Not every single country can be both critical and constructive. And Brazil, over the years, has been this critical, constructive friend to the United Nations, to the global governance. And to go back to COP and maybe finalize COP and BRICS, the ways in which, the Brazilian BRICS presidency is it's a rotation. So it happens to be in Brazil this year. But Brazil's decision to host COP was a decision. And it was a decision because Brazil believed that it could, despite the uncertainties, the turbulence, the fragmentation of the world, that it could offer something in order to protect a system. And it's not to protect because we don't have any criticism. It's to protect because we still believe that we are better off with cooperation than without. And that's exactly how Brazil also tried to include the climate agenda more strongly in the BRICS this year. So I would have, I mean, we all have policy inputs, insights, criticism, things that we think that Brazil could do better, could do different. But considering all we see around us and the many forces that are trying to dismantle those spaces, I think the Brazilian government voice is very valuable. It's very refreshing. Even in the COP space, that we have many questions of whether or not it's working, it could change the format, it really is lacking legitimacy and authority. Brazil is trying to propose different things. Whether or not they're going to work, that's something else. But it's refreshing to have a leadership this year that it's at least trying, right? In a world that we see so many backtracking or attacking. So I'm going to end here for the time being.
Thank you, Laura. And then the next question to go to Maíra. I think one of the choices that the presidency at COPs made is that you do have the high-level decision people. Those are policymakers that already have the pen to make decisions, and they make decisions. And then you have civil society who has no pen, will not have. But then the COP decision is to foster these voices from civil society that either they will influence the high-level decisions, or either they will create decisions that should be made by the high-level decisions. It's a very bold move in a world that is very polarized. It's not simple. And Laura, I think what you say reminds me of what means climate diplomacy. I was in Bonn, SB62. So here is the presidency. We're talking about the Mutirão. And someone in Colombia said, we should discuss the fossil fuel model. And another one for saying, we should discuss the bringing oil exploration to the Amazon and so on. All of them were criticizing the government in their face, but in a diplomatic way. They were just saying, we're not rioting. We are in a discussion. We are working together. We're not happy. That's why we are so pissed off. But we are trying to make a diplomacy here because we believe a dialogue. It's a methodology of change. So, Maíra, I'd love to go to you. So indigenous groups and climate diplomacy. Indigenous communities are not only the frontline defenders of the Amazon, but also global actors in climate diplomacy. What does true inclusion of indigenous and grassroots perspectives look like in Brazil's agenda? And what risks do you see that these voices can be sidelined?
Well, true inclusion is not a tokenism. It's co-decision making. And for me, there is one big key here in all the processes we've seen in Brazil over the years since dictatorship time to now. If you look at the history of Brazil, if we look back, there is a history of cycles of contention, you can say, because there is like one bad law comes up, civil society mobilizes with the international community, pressures. With the pressure, a new law comes to protect something. And then after a few months or years, another law comes to debunk that law that was created. I've researched this so deeply for 5 years, and it's cyclical. So we see ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs, and it's always happening. It's always happening. And I think that the strategic fail here, and maybe the biggest opportunity we have, is to decolonize spaces. Decolonizing spaces, decolonizing our way of working will give us the opportunity to really, truly move forward. And that means indigenous, oh, I have a toddler crying here. That means indigenous peoples must be on delegations, not just on side events, which we've been seeing it more and more. That means they are also paid and recognized as knowledge holders and diplomats. And that still, I've seen a lack. I've seen a COP in Dubai, everyone that was there, I bet everyone that was there, non-Indigenous, was paid for their time. But I saw a lot of Indigenous leaders there that were not paid for their time. Like, we just drag them, and I say we as in organizations, government, we just drag them to places like they don't have a bill to pay. And that's not reality anymore for most of them who are in cities working and traveling and leaving their families behind. That's an issue we need to address. And then supported with language, justice, logistics, and sovereignty. Inclusion for me means the shared authorship of the climate agenda. No forest stands without its people. And so erasing Indigenous voices is not just unjust, it's a very strategic failure. Now, we're acting as we are including them right now, and I've seen advances, and I praise those advances, but we're still lacking, and we're still behind in so many ways. And when they're truly included, like you were talking about funds a few minutes ago, and the problem is, and it's great, I mean, I was excited about hearing this tropical forest forever facility. That's exciting. But if the funds are going to Indigenous communities, and we're not talking about, you know, because the biggest problem right now is a lot of those Indigenous communities don't have the structure to receive those funds in the way funders like to give funds. So when are we going to talk about that? Because we're expecting them to act as non-Indigenous people, as white people. And they have to do those crazy reports, and they have to create all of this projects in English or in other languages. And then have the receipts for everything, which in the Amazon is really challenging. And so if we're not talking about decolonizing those initiatives and really seeing, like, how can we build from bottom up and not from top down? And the risks, if sidelined, are false solutions, which we've seen so many false solutions dominating carbon offsets, green colonialism. We have that. And we already have done those. So let's not just keep doing those. Let's change it. And then violation of rights through top-down climate projects. And that's, I mean, I want to see every organization working with climate. Show me you're not doing a top-down approach. Show me you are actually including Indigenous voices impacted by your project from ground up in the agenda, in those meetings. Because I have not seen that. I haven't. And that is a problem we need to address. And then also loss of the planet's most effective forest protectors. Then I see science through spiritual lenses. So I am very grounded in a way that I believe there is a way. When there is a problem, there's always a way. And I believe that people need to feel inspired in order to act. Because if they feel like it's all a failure, like, well, I can't do anything, right, to change. So I want people to feel hope. And I feel that hope when I'm walking in the Amazon rainforest with my Indigenous partners. I see hope because they've been doing so much beautiful work. Even without funding, even without resources, even without support, they're doing it. They're doing amazing work. And all I want to see more and more is for civil society and for governments and for organizations and for funders to be working really in a decolonized way alongside with them. Building from bottom up, not from top down, like we've always done. And it's not an easy task. It's challenging, but it's exciting.
Mayra, thanks. I'm just wondering here if the open government concept is colonized or not, and where is colonized. And it's very interesting challenge. So maybe as the next questions, we can go for a wish list. We can go for 1 to 2 or 3 things that you wish would exist by today to COP30 that we make this collaboration works. For me, I think the lesson learned from the open government movement is that participation is not enough. We designed institutions to be closed one, at least the colonial ones. And then there's always someone on top that make decisions. It's very hard to participate. And then IAP2 has 5 grades of participation. The first one is a duty to inform. So the government has to say what they are doing, but that's it. The second one is the one we mostly use today, which is consultation, which is the government can ask questions, you can answer, but the government does whatever they want, or companies and so on. I think this is creating lots of pressures and problems. And then you have collaboration and co-creation. Co-creation would be to do everything together. The government still remains the power to make decisions, but you do everything together. This is absolutely hard, time-consuming, expensive. And then going to what Maida said about where is the fund for civil society to participate, they always forget that part. So you have to go to Brasilia, you have to take care of a toddler while doing a live and so on. And then, but collaboration is possible. And I think we need to see more mechanisms of collaboration. So there is an active listening and an active duty to reply. It's not as structured as a decision maker, but it has to be more collaborative. And if I have to make a wish list, I wish COP would at least try to implement 100 million mechanisms of collaboration to see whatever works, and then we can give as a legacy for the next COP. So, Laura, we start with you. What is your wish list? What do you wish exists from here to COP that would be a game changer for this collaboration between stakeholders?
I think at Igarapé, considering the work we do, and we work a lot on the problems. I think I've skipped that in my initial introduction of what we do, but part of our work is to understand the dynamics of environmental crime in the Amazon and the ways in which environmental crime is stop not only hurting people, nature, and climate, but also stopping us from fulfilling the commitments we have in terms of, protecting the forest and its people. And that's, part of the research work we do is really to disentangle what environmental crime is in the region. And we talk about illegal mining and land grabbing and illegal logging and, all the other illegal conversion of forest land into agricultural land and so on. And so part of my wish list is for us, not only us in civil society, I think we do a good job in revealing the problem. And it took us quite a while for the government also to accept that there was a problem and to create the right, I'm going to put it right in between inverted commas, right? But to create a set of tools in order to address that problem. What we want from the government is also that capacity of bringing to the international arena to COP not only the solutions and how we're doing good, but also being able to talk about things that we are and the challenges, the problems. We have to talk about the problems as well in order then to present the solutions that we have already. But we need to scale those solutions. We need more funding. We need more partners, technical partners, political partners, financial partners. And part of our work at Igarapé Institute this moment is to say, we can talk about those problems. We can talk about environmental crime. You should talk about environmental crime. We have to make visible that our challenge here in the country like Brazil to fulfill our NDC is to solve the land question, right? And the deforestation question. And therefore, you have to talk about the problems, but then you have to empower actors that are working for the solutions. And actors like the indigenous people that protect their territories, that monitor the territories, actors inside the state. They're also creating the right public policies to monitor, to do law enforcement, and to promote alternative solutions, economic solutions for people to live with a standing forest. So my wish list would be that COP would not only be a show of how great we are in the climate action, considering, the challenging scenario we're having, but also probably a more honest conversation about what we're doing good, what we, as you know, as a country in Brazil, but also as a global international community has achieved so far? What are the challenges, and how can we do better? What are the things that we know already that we could scale? And perhaps a more honest conversation rather than a show off of only either countries blocking the conversation or others are just showing how great we are, would be more profitable for us moving forward in the climate negotiations. That's my wish list. Honesty and ambition, right? Pragmatic ambition.
Yep, I like it. Maida, please share your wish list.
Yeah, I wrote some things here, and I think you guys nailed it. You bring a lot of solutions, and that's the beauty of talking about solutions, which I miss in the spaces where we gather so much to talk about problems. It's like, okay, let's go to solutions because we know the problems already. That's 100% clear. For me, I think the three biggest wishes would be share power with frontline voices, and that means inclusion in the decision-making delegations, fund their participatory equitably, and provide language and cultural accessibility, which is needed since we have over 250 different languages across Brazilian indigenous communities. And a lot of those people can't even come to a COP event because they don't speak Portuguese. So talking about accessibility, and I know this is not an easy task, but why not dream? I think AI opens up such a world of technology to make those wild dreams come true. So I'm 100% pro using that. Prioritize regenerative solutions over market fixes, which really for me means recognize territorial protection as climate action, and invest in agroecology, biocultural restoration, decolonize lifestyles, and the support for fast solutions. And I'm not even going to list them because everyone has a different view from those false solutions. And then make finance and just and accessible, which we already talked about. Like, how can we make the climate funds not a bureaucratic process, a decolonized process for local communities to be able to access them? Prioritize Global South led and community-owned projects. How can we actually make that happen and shift from charity to reparations and responsibility? Very simple.
Done. Well, I think I'll get two questions from the audience here. We'll have a closure of the last 5 minutes, so I'll bring both to the front, and please feel free to address them as you like. So the first one is about, for countries in the Global South watching Brazil's roles, what's the one specific practice, policy, or approach you think they could adapt to strengthen their own climate and development agenda? And the second one is, as COP summits multiply and BRICS nations rise to the center of power, can any real transformation occur if we remain trapped in the logic of upward development? And then the person who made this made a specific relationship with Gandhi's visions of voluntary descent, trustship over consumptions, and so on. So how do you see these, and bringing some concluding remarks together? What they should learn from us that could adapt their own agenda, and can any real change transformation occur? Laura, we can start with you, and then we end with Maida.
I was thinking, and although this is a conversation about Brazil and we are Brazil-based experts, I think there are many things that are happening across the Global South that can be seen as innovations, and we should pay attention to and give more emphasis and empower. So in the multilateral space, a space where so many people are talking about reform and some people are talking about dismantling, we've seen in the climate space a lot of innovation coming from small islands. And I think about this region, Latin American and Caribbean, a lot of the innovation came from countries like Barbados. They're really rethinking financial schemes in order to make funding for small countries and small island countries more accessible, connecting this with a big crisis of debt across the global south. And so I think just like Barbados is doing and trying to innovate and create the Bridgetown initiatives for us to rethink the way we work with climate finance, and Brazil is trying to bring what it matters to Brazil, which is the conservation of tropical forests. I think we need other countries to find that voice, to also promote certain policy solutions and ideas. And this is not about altruism altogether. Actually, it's based on a very specific need. The fact that Barbados is pushing this is because it matters to Barbados. The fact that Brazil is pushing and trying to mobilize and galvanize energy around tropical forest conservation, but also the Alliance Against Poverty and Hunger. This is something that happened last year with the Brazil G20 presidency. It's really because it matters to Brazil. And what we want is to see more countries in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. There are, because there is capacity in the South. There is willingness, there is capacity, there is ambition, there is vision. And what we need is for countries to come forward with this, with their own, versions. We don't need one leader. We need many leaders. We need, and maybe, this very idea of leadership is a bit outdated. But let's say that we need this mutirão. We need the constellation of countries putting forward solutions coming from their, national realities, place-based innovation. And this will go back, hopefully, to what we were discussing before, that there is no place-based innovation without conversation with civil society, right? Governments are not the single holders of that kind of innovation, quite on the opposite. And so to end, and maybe just to, probably that's my final minute, so I have to thank you all for this conversation. But I think on the bigger kind of development question, I think there are people that are challenging. There's no single model out there. And we see ourselves in the system, in the capitalistic system, in a post-colonial, with the colonial heritage of the world we live, but innovating in the way that brings a lot of transformation. And so maybe I'm not going to be able to address the bigger question of whether or not we can escape development the way it is, but I really think there are many people that are trying to do development differently. You can call it development, or you can call it something else in the terminology, but we have to trust there are many people across the world, organizations, and even governments that are trying to do differently, right? And we have to empower those voices inside and outside the government.
Thank you, Lauren. Mayra, we move to you to close.
I'm a sensitive person, so I'm just feeling a lot of energy right now, and I will speak from what I truly believe, which I can't speak for something else that I don't believe. And I'm just going to stick to the end of the question that the person wrote, and I don't remember who wrote it. Has talking about colonization not merely ended, but morphed into globalization, a more dangerous, more subtle conquest of the earth and the spirit. Was Gandhi not, in essence, the first to sense that healing of the planet requires not more innovation, but a radical reordering of the soul? This is powerful, and we are talking about solutions, but honestly, I feel like most of the times it's like going to the doctor to take a medicine and not looking at the root of the problem. I went to a geography event a few years ago here in the US, and I heard this really big geographer talking about capitalism and why this system was built for the system itself and not for people. So the entire structure of our society and the matrix that we live in was built in through the lenses of something that is not meant for us and not meant for the planet, not meant for work. And so every solution coming from that mindset will it work? I feel like those are little fixes. It's like taking an aspirin when you have a headache. But why that headache started in the first place? I feel like in this system and this society that we live in right now, yes, those solutions are quick fixes, but they're not going to address the root of the problem. And when you spend time with indigenous communities, you understand that the root of the problem is really way deeper in our souls, and it's a huge, massive change that would have to occur in the entire system itself. I have so many quotes from Ailton Krenak. I love him, this Brazilian indigenous biggest thinker of all times, I think. And he said, the idea of humanity is sick. We need to postpone the end of the world. And he really invites us to see that progress as defined by colonial capitalism is an illusion that disconnects us from nature and from ourselves. And for me, I what I get from him is true change. It does not comes from within the same mindset that created the crisis. It comes from recovering the dream of being Earth again, living in reciprocity, not dominance. And so going back to the first phrase, when I was thinking, when I started and I said my name, it's, the Earth doesn't need us. We are the ones that need Earth. We are the ones that need it. And so for me, truly solutions are created or can only be created if they center the colonial worldview and we stop seeing Earth as a resource. And that breaks the entire system itself. Like what, even everything that we talk in COP, everything that we talk in all of the circles that we sit in for so many years, we're not ever addressing the true source of all the problems. So for me, it's, let's sit and listen to ancestral knowledge, not just scientific data. Reroute our imagination in relationship, not extraction. Relearn how to belong, not just survive. I know those seem very big and out there, but I believe that true solution will only come when we sit back and rethink our way of existing. And it's possible, it's doable, and it will take time, and that's okay. That's where we are at.
Damn. And that's how you close it. I will call Raj here for a last minute and close out. And thank you very much, Laura and Maida, for the sharing learn slots. Thank you. We are one humanity, Emma as well, for opening, and thank you all. Raj, up to you.
Thank you very much. Am I being heard and seen?
Yes.
Well, I'm Raj Mohan Gandhi, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have heard all three of you, Fabro and Myra, Laura. I've learned so much today. So you have educated one old man at least. You've done that wonderfully. You've not only educated me, you have given me a lot of encouragement. I wish at this stage that the three of you, and some others from Brazil maybe, could be thrown all over the world. I feel that your spirit, your honesty, your frankness, your courageous words, so many wonderful phrases I heard today. I love the idea of reciprocity, which recently I just now heard. And the idea also that Brazil belongs to the South, but it also has a connection, amazing connection with the first world, with Europe. It gives Brazil a fabulous opportunity and a fabulous importance in the world today. But I just feel that your honesty and the constructive nature of the conversation, both frank and constructive nature of the conversation, gives me tremendous encouragement. I wish people in India, people in China, people in Nigeria could spend some time with all of you, people like you, how this quality of Brazil that we have seen today could be injected into the rest of humanity is the kind of wish I have. Some of, you were asked about your wish list. This is my wish. I wish that this frankness plus constructive and friendly nature. My last point is the technical quality of this seminar was so good. Everything could be heard so clearly, and the moderation was wonderful. The contributions were wonderful. So I was just very, very thrilled. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Raj Mohan, as well. We're going to go ahead and say goodbye. Thank you to Mayra and Laura, and of course, our moderator, Fabro. For everyone who is attending, we would love for you all to stay connected with us. You can follow us on social media, visit our website. We're going to put up a recording of this webinar and some kind of key takeaways. We're also always looking for new voices to join the conversation. So if you're a writer, a researcher, an activist, or a storyteller with a perspective to share, we would love for you to pitch us your ideas and contribute to the platform. So with that, on behalf of all of us at We Are One Humanity, thank you again for being here and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.